Hello and welcome to Incursion, an indie games podcast, your weekly source for all the indie games news you need to know. This week we are bringing you 3 awesome indie games news stories, but before we get into that, I'd like to introduce myself, Von Hyde, alongside my illustrious co-host, the biggest of average, Josh Boys. How you doing, big Josh Boy?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm back another week. Let's get at it.
Nice. I'm super excited for this. Also, have you ever noticed that I don't actually say an indie games podcast? It always ends up meshing together to be like indie game podcast.
I guess I hear it so often that it just connects for me and it doesn't really matter as much. But I guess if someone was like listening to it for the first time, it might kind of sound like Mushmouth. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I say it, 2, I edit it, and 3, I listen to it. So I hear it basically 3 times, and every single time I'm like, just enunciate a little bit more. Just say the words. And instead I'm like, any game podcast.
It's okay. I've heard this from, I think Joseph said this on one of their episodes of Active Quest, but I had this experience where I told someone like in the real world, and I was like, yeah, I do a podcast. And they're like, oh, what's the podcast? And I go, it's Indie Incursion. And they go, I didn't know you were Indian. And I was like, what?
My God, yeah.
I was like, no. I was like, Indie Incursion. Indie, like independent. And they were like, oh, okay. I was like, why would I be Indian? I don't look Indian.
Yeah, Joseph said Indian Incursion. He's like, I don't know what that means, but okay.
Part of me is like, is it too late to like use a more well-known word?
I know. I really like at this point, I'm like,
we should just call it Indie Invasion.
That's what I wanted to do. I'm not even joking. I feel like we've had this conversation before that I actually wanted to have Indie Invasion, but Indie Invasion apparently was taken by somebody who had not posted in the longest time. So instead, I just looked up synonyms for invasion, and incursion is one of them.
You could have called it Indie Rampage.
I could, but I just liked the II. I don't know why.
Indie Ice Cream Invasion.
Oh, that one's interesting.
Yeah, we could talk about ice cream and video games. Dude, I could talk about ice cream for like forever. The last weekend, I went to this place called Larry's that's close by. It's like this mom and pop kind of shop. Dude, they have this red velvet ice cream. Oh, it is amazing. I was like in heaven. So good.
How many types of ice cream do you try? Like typically, do you normally just get the same kind like everywhere, or do you try like a plethora?
Oh, I try flavors? A plethora. I always, because like my wife feels so weird about it. She's always like, I already asked twice. You ask for a sample this time. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like, that's their job. Give me all the samples. I try every flavor just about. And then I'm like, okay. I end up sticking usually with like the same kind of types, unless it's holiday season. And then I'll go for like eggnog, because eggnog's the bomb.
That sounds hilarious. You're like, can I get a sample of everyone? And in the end, can I have vanilla?
Can I have the vanilla?
I just imagine that person being like, fuck you, dude.
Nah, I don't try all of them, but I don't feel bad about doing it. And also, like, we shouldn't, because both me and my wife worked at a Haagen-Dazs, so like, I've had to deal with people asking me to give them samples all the time. So I'm just like, I know what it's like. Just give me all the ice cream. It's fine. I'm actually going to pay you. Like, I'm not one of those jerks who's just going to run away. So I never feel like guilt about asking for, I want to know what flavor I want to pick. Like, it doesn't matter. They're just there.
I only ever eat bubblegum. Yeah.
Whoa, you are a monster.
I love the bubblegum ice cream at Baskin Robbins. So I typically don't eat ice cream, but when I do, it's bubblegum.
Wow. First off, you don't eat ice cream, you're not human. Second off, bubblegum, what the hell? What is wrong? I gotta try this.
It's so good, dude.
Every time I see one of those flavors, like a bubblegum or like some weird, like crazy colored flavor, I'm always like, you're going to be disgusting, and I don't even want any of it.
I don't know what exactly the ice cream tastes like. I mean, it's got like,
you don't know what it tastes like. What are you putting in your mouth?
No. Okay, so I had to explain it a bit. The ice cream itself has a unique taste, but then there's also small chunks of bubble gum within the ice cream.
That sounds awful.
Well, it's not too bad, because then I just like I'll eat like
What
some
do you like?
of it
Save all the
because-
pieces, and then you're like, "Ooh, I got a stick of bubble gum."
No, I mean kinda, yeah. No, I I eat some of them, and then after that, it like starts to make my tongue hurt. So instead, I will like put the ice cream in my mouth, suck off all the ice cream, and then spit out the bubblegum piece. And then
You're
at
putting
the end,
so much added work into this, and also gross that you're just saving a spit wad like collection of gum.
yeah. It's probably not the best way to eat it, but I find it delicious. It's fantastic. They don't often sell it in the pint or anything though, which kind of sucks.
All right,
'Cause
next
then-
time.
Just can't. I just have to get like 1 or 2 scoops of bubblegum ice cream.
All right, next time I'm there, which isn't often, but I'll try to go out of my way to go get some bubblegum ice cream.
It's seriously like my fiance worked at the exact same Baskin Robbins that we normally go to, and
Ooh, awkward.
I was like, "Have you ever seen like an adult other than me order butter like a
Bubblegum?
bubblegum ice cream?" And she's like, "No,
No,
it's always like children."
you're a monster.
Yeah, she's basically shit on me and was like, "Nah, you're a fucking idiot."
Oh man, I'm glad we took this tangent. This was a great one.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. What have you been playing this week? I mean, what have you been doing in general other than eating ice cream?
Other than eating ice cream. Okay, so I want to talk about 3 games, which I know is a lot, but I really have to ramble because 2 of them I got codes from the developers, and I'm super thankful for it. And they're both really fun games that I want to talk about. Those are the indie ones, and then I want to talk about a Nintendo game that came out. So I'll start with the indie ones. The first one I'll talk about is called Pilgrims. It's this game that was developed and published by Amanita Design, I think is how you say it. It's really cool. I've played their games before. They're very like point and click adventure kind of games and puzzly, which always, for me, isn't like my style for the most part, but I really like the way they did this, and you're gonna, call me out on this, but they use cards.
Yeah, I just looked at the Steam page and I was like, it's a fucking card game.
Yeah, so it doesn't put too much emphasis on that card part, so like, calm down. But it's actually
literally
really,
every bit of gameplay I'm looking at right now has to do with these fucking cards.
I know, but the cards are literally your inventory, though. It's not just like that they're cards. So the way this works is you're like this traveler who's just essentially trying to get on a boat and go like sailing, but you can't go on the boat unless you find this lady's bird. And so you're on this giant adventure trying to like make friends, do random quests, all in the giant adventure of trying to get this bird so that you can sail on the boat. But in between that, you're doing like really weird things like meeting the devil, you're basically fighting a bear, you're fighting a dragon, you're doing a bunch of different things. And one of the cool things about it is you have your character, who is a card, and you can run to different areas of this map, and each area will then highlight into essentially a drawing. And the art style of it is really nice. Like it's very, very beautiful. I really like the cartoony aspect to it. But what happens is in that world, you can click on various elements in the world, and if it's something that you can pick up, you'll essentially take it, and it will become a card in your inventory. And you can use that in other areas of the map that you walk to. Like, for instance, the first thing you do is you have a tent, and you can put your character on that first map. You can then click on the tent, and he'll go inside it, and he'll find a coin. And so, cool, you've got this coin. You don't know what to do with it, but then you go travel around, and eventually you find this old lady who's asking for a coin. And you're like, oh, I have one. I just picked up one. I can give it to her. And then she goes, oh, she's so thankful, and she becomes friends with you, basically, because you gave her that money. And so her character card is now in your inventory. So now you can go to areas that you originally went to, but you can, instead of placing your the normal character you had to start with, you can place down her, and characters or events will transpire differently depending on which character you place. And so it's really cool because it's a puzzle game of basically transitioning from one area to the next, trying to find new items to then fulfill some quest, whether that's do something like finding a fishing rod. I had to make this guy really happy, so I had to find certain items and certain things that characters could do to make him happy, so he would agree to giving me his fishing rod so I could then go fishing, so that I could then basically give that fish to a bartender so that I could get a bottle of gin, so that I could make another friend. So it's like all these transpiring things that go one from one, so you have to keep going back. You have to figure out kind of who has what. And it honestly, it was a short adventure. I think it's a little pricey for the amount of time. It's $5, but it is like 1 to 2 hours for a playthrough, depending on how quick you are. But the nice thing about it is there's replayability in it, where you can essentially go through a number of things in multiple ways. So there is that added element where you can go back and do certain things in a various assortment of methods, meaning there's different ways that at one point there's like a dragon, and you can take that on either helping the dragon, defeating the dragon, putting the dragon to sleep. Like there's a number of different ways that you can go about these tasks. So there is replayability in it, and I just liked it for its like the humor in it, as well as the whimsical kind of nature of this game just in general. So I really recommend it. I think, like I said, $5, it's a little bit, but it's only $5. So I still recommend it. I think if you're into puzzle games, I think this is definitely something for, those types of individuals. And then I don't know if you have any questions. If not, I'll just keep rolling into the second game.
I was kind of going to ask if you've ever played their other games, which is Machinarium or Samarost, I think is what it's called.
I've played Samarost.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Machinarium I've seen on, or it's like Machinarium. I'm not 100% sure. I've seen it on PSN like 50 times. Mm-hmm. It's like always, anytime a game goes on sale, I swear to God, that game goes on sale. But I've never played any of them. Are they similar to this? They're just like standard point-and-click adventure games?
Yeah, so it's very similar to that style, only it has that interesting card aesthetic where you have essentially, in most point-and-click adventures, you would be one character. You would click to where you want to travel to, which is still kind of the same, but there's this... in this game, it's a little different because there's that overworld of kind of like a map, and you click where you want to go, you jump into a scene, and then you basically have those character cards, so you can play a different character rather than being one, static character at a time. And then you can use certain inventory by placing the inventory item on your character or on other characters to give them something. So like if you wanted to trade with someone, you would have to use a specific character who isn't like offensive to the other one, so that they would basically be able to talk to, and then you can put the item on them so that you can trade those items. So it's a little bit different, but it feels very the same in that point and click adventure type where you're literally going from one area to the next and trying to solve some kind of puzzle.
All right. What's the other game you've been playing?
So the second one was provided by Rose City Games, and this was publisher Viz Media, Cat Lady. So
yeah, talked about it on the podcast like twice now, I think.
Yeah. So I reached out and I was like, hey, we've talked about your game. We want to actually give it a try. And they were like, yeah, sure. And I was super excited because we've talked about this, and I generally play a lot of these kind of roguelikes and like hard type games. And it definitely is early access. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's not a complete game. There's only, I think, 3 zones that I went through. And then it basically gave me that screen where it's like, hey, we're still working on things, but you can keep on playing the loop. But in my time of playing, which took roughly, I want to say 2 to 4. I don't really remember how much time I spent because I went back and forth on things. But in that time, I really ended up getting all the way through because I just ended up getting a good build. And that's kind of where this comes into. It's a really good roguelite in the sense of your build can be different each time because of the cats you use. So it's kind of weird, but essentially you get 2 abilities in this game. You get a primary cat and a secondary cat. And as you're first starting off, you'll get a primary cat, which is just to shoot basically fireballs straightwards, depending on where you angle your mouse or your controller, depending on which way you're playing. And then you have a secondary cat, which is like this marshmallow cat that you just chuck at people, and it's kind of like a grenade.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So you basically get that, and then as you're traversing through the essentially through different areas of the house, which are now being haunted and monsters are coming everywhere, like just turning up, you'll find these events where either someone's giving you something, selling you something, or random cats that are kind of just lying around, and they'll be like, hey, pick up me, and you can swap out your primary cat or secondary cat. So like your primary cat, I had a couple of times where I found one where instead of a straight shot attack, there was a widespread 3 hearts that would kind of shoot out, because it was like called Love'ems, and it was just a cat that would kiss. There was one where it was like this magician type thing where it was I think it just had one eye or something like that, but it was like a tracking, so you would shoot out and your attacks would just follow enemies and like try to heat seek them. Secondary cats I think were kind of meh. There was a lot of cool ones, but I just don't think they did as much damage as your primary, but that makes sense based on primary and secondary. But there was one where you would have a little box guy who kind of looks like Snake from Metal Gear Solid, who would just kind of like roam around, and you would click where he needs to go, and if enemies walk by, he would attack them from outside of the box. So he would be like, nah! And then you had one who was like a robot that would just, you'd position him, and he would just start firing lasers depending on where he's at. I thought those ones were cool, but I never really cared too much about using my secondary cat. It was all about the primary, and it was usually picking the Love'ems, the spread one, just so I had more of an attack in a larger range. But I liked it because you can do that. You could have those, you know, the mix of cats, and then you also, as you're going through the game, you get all these power-ups, as, you know, in most roguelites. And they really did do it in a way where a lot of them felt useful. It wasn't just like, oh, a power up and it's like 0.2 of an attack damage up, and you're like, okay, great, I don't really feel any difference. Like these ones would be a legit, you can see that there is a clear increase in your attack range, there is a clear increase in your attack damage. One of them, when your shots hit an enemy, tiny shots would spray out of them and hit enemies behind them, which I thought was awesome. And it even worked for like the tracking heat-seeking one, which I didn't think it was going to work. I was like, oh, this definitely won't work the same way, but it did. So I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And then as you're going through, there's a bunch of other little items like poison enemies, like what was some of the others, to slow them when you hit them. So there's like a lot of different things that you can go in each run and build out your character differently. One of them I bought twice on the run that I won. It was kind of weird. There's this one thing called like works in mysterious ways, and it just, that's exactly what it says. You buy it, and your primary attack and secondary attack now like swerve randomly and go in circles. So it was like really weird. I was very confused, and I accidentally bought it a second time, and it made it even weirder. So it was like my attacks were wonky and just going everywhere, but it was like it really worked in my favor because sometimes the enemies would move, and my attack would just follow them, not expectedly, but it would just go a different way that they were running to. So it worked out pretty well. From a difficulty standpoint, I definitely think that there is a lot of, I'd like to see more variety in it, just because the actual worlds, as you keep playing, every time you fail and you go back into there, they do definitely repeat themselves, you can see. It's like, I don't know how they do it, whether it's procedurally generated in a certain sense of like pick and choose, but a lot of the levels I could see that they were repeating based on the same type of enemy and the same background, which is fine because you have the different elements, and once again, this is early access, so there's, you know, room for improvement in that way. But the good thing was it does have that element of difficulty just because all of the areas are very close. And so enemy attacks, the minute you get in a room is when they'll start and you'll be able to hit them. The doors close and then you're locked in, kind of like a Binding of Isaac type game. So from that point, you're in close quarters and you have to like dodge around, and as you go higher up in levels, you essentially have monsters who have more difficult to dodge attacks, because whether they're shooting out more widespread attacks or maybe they track you or they're larger, there's a lot to it. But I definitely had a lot of fun with it. I think some of my gripes with it were that I would get stuck on corners really easily, and it was kind of annoying, but it wasn't the biggest deal. It was just something I had to learn to be like, if I hit a corner, I have to quickly press back and then go around. But sometimes it felt a little sticky. And there were a few issues where I felt like when I was attacking, it wasn't starting with the heat-seeking missile one. I'm not sure about that one. But I still had a lot of fun with it. I still think that the bosses were really cool. I can't wait to see more of those, because the boss fights were actually pretty tough and pretty interesting. There was like a big giant bird where it was very hectic. It was flying around attacking you. It was throwing random bones. It was throwing its feathers out. Like it was just a lot going on. It was very chaotic, and I really enjoyed that because it made me go in and build a certain way at first, knowing that these enemies were around and I was fighting them and not the big boss. And then I got to the boss and I was like, oh, you know what? Based on who it is, I have to find a different build. I have to pick different cats, and I have to strategize based on how this enemy is coming up. So there's a lot of good, promising parts to this game. There's, obviously a few rough edges because it's early access, but I definitely think it's worth picking up for people who like this genre and who want to, help them get better and give feedback. I know a lot of people don't like the early access type thing just because, you're buying into a game that's not fully featured. But if you want to help them out or you think it looks interesting, I definitely recommend it. I had a fun time with it, and I can't wait to see more of the game expand.
What did you play it on?
I played it on PC, so I played it through Steam.
Oh, okay. I was wondering where it was early access through, because I tried to look up Cat Lady, and it ended up coming up with The Cat Lady, which is apparently a completely different horror game.
Yeah, that's kind of an issue, I feel like, from a marketing perspective, just because I did the same thing when I was trying to find information on them, before I did the podcast, and I was like, what is this? I was like, this has nothing to do with what I played.
Yeah, it looks nothing like it. That one's seemingly this weird survival horror game, not this cutesy roguelike bullet hell.
So basically, if you're gonna go for this game and it sounds interesting, only type Cat Lady game, not The Cat Lady.
I swear to God, I just put Cat Lady. Maybe I put The Cat Lady. Okay, though, is this an early access available for everybody?
Yeah, so this is available for everybody. It's $10 right now for early access. I assume when, it's fully complete, it'll be higher price, as most early access games kind of have that method. But I don't officially know. But like I said, I think it was good. I spent a good, 4 hours. I got through it because I had a really good build. For some people, it might take a little bit longer. For some people, it might be quicker. But it is super cute. It is, in a way, very difficult in certain elements to it. I like the fact that you're constantly upgrading your character in the actual runs that you do. And then based on how many ghosts you kill, they'll sometimes drop these spooky ghost symbols. And whenever you collect those, you can then come back to the main hub and upgrade your character there by including upgrades to your health. For you just have more max health, or upgrades in the sense of you're buying things that will appear in runs as you go into the dungeons. Well, they're not really dungeons, but just parts of the house.
Oh, okay. You had one more game that you wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, one more game. So the last game, and I'll try to make this quick because I don't really have too much to say, and it's not an indie game, but man, I'm playing Ring Fit Adventure. Dude, This thing is so fun. It's actually really cool. I'm realizing how weak my legs are in comparison to the rest of my body. But man, this game's actually pretty cool. They set it up. So I'm playing the adventure mode. And for those who don't know, Ring Fit Adventure is basically the new exercise game that the Nintendo Switch came out with. They give you a Pilates ring that one of the Joy-Cons hooks into. And then they give you a kind of like a a band that connects around your leg that the other Joy-Con goes into. And so the motion tracking for it is actually pretty damn spot on. I was very impressed with it. But it's really weird the way you play because it makes you constantly like squeeze the Pilates ring, pull on the Pilates ring, you're jumping around. But I'm in a second story apartment, like I'm in the second floor. So I can't be like running around, which is most of the game, because the adventure mode, you basically run to your next enemy and then do workouts to fight them. So I have to do silent mode, which means instead of running, I squat over and over and over and over again. And man, I like the first day I started it, like 5 minutes in, I was like, whew, this is getting kind of tough. And then the next day I did it again. And I was like, oh my God, I think my legs are they're gonna break. I was like, I would try to do these workouts and I was just like getting so winded. And finally the day right after, I was like trying to walk around and I was just like, I can't even walk. It's just like so bad. But it was really good, and it's really fun the way they do it because you're essentially running around, you're hitting these random enemies, and it turns into an RPG battle where you have to do certain workouts, like you have to do overhead presses, you have to do squats, you have to do leg to chest crunches. And the game is tracking all those and rating you. And based on your rating for each one of those reps, you attack the monster and do a certain amount of damage. You do more if you get a great, less if you do good, and even less if you don't get any rating at all, which just means you kind of like did it. So it's all based on how well your form is. So I was really impressed with it, and I like it because it adds this story element. It adds all these actual RPG elements of strategy to which enemies you attack, because you'll get different advantages based on the muscle group that you use based on their color. So it's like there's a lot that's going into this, more than I thought it would have, for it just being a like, hey, get off your ass and exercise type of game. But it's a lot of fun. I'm really impressed with it.
So you're somebody who actually exercises. Does this feel like it's giving you like a legitimate workout?
Yeah, so it does. And one of the cool things that they do is they literally ask you, they're like, do you work out? And I was like, yeah, okay. And they're like, how often? And I was like, a pretty good amount. And they're like, okay. And based on your questions that you answer, they'll give you a difficulty level. And it goes from 1 to 30. So based on that, it'll then do that rating system of that great, good, and just like okay. And it will lower the bar for you depending on how much... how high your difficulty is, and it will also give you less reps if you have the lower difficulty.
It sounds like you're gonna have some thick buns by the end of that.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie, I was like pretty excited because I was like, oh, this actually pushes me to do legs, which I often neglect.
What? You skip leg day?
I skip a lot of leg days.
Never skip leg day.
But, and this is the thing, I skip leg day because 2 times a week I do the Stairmaster for 30 minutes. I just walk upstairs and I'm like, that's enough legs. And I was like, surely I'll be good at this. Apparently walking upstairs do me no good for my legs because they were so friggin' weak. Go figure.
You're like walking around on these little pencil legs.
Pretty much. I don't know, man. It's a good game, and it definitely does, like, I think this is an awesome initiative, especially for people who aren't like as inclined to work out. For me, it's like it's just another good, avenue for when I don't want to go to the gym. But like for people who don't exercise at all and are ashamed, not like I don't want to put it in that way, but like there's some people who don't want to go to the gym because they don't work out already, and they get that kind of like, oh, other people work out at the gym, I don't want to be seen in front of that. And like that's a legit, thing that people are afraid of. This is a great way to be like, hey, it's okay, do it in your house, work out, do whatever you want. This is going to motivate you to do more. Maybe you'll go to the gym later, maybe not, maybe you'll just play this game, and that's totally fine. But it keeps people active, and the game is like really good about giving you constant tips and like random things just about exercise in general each time you play. And I really like it. It even like focuses on what you're focusing on as far as your body. The second day, I literally did all upper body exercises because I was just like, I cannot do squats. I'm going to kill myself if I do more squats. And so the game at the end makes you do like stretching. And it's like, okay, You ready to do your cooldown? And I was like, sure. And the game literally goes, hey, you did a lot of upper body, so let's do a stretch thing, a routine just specifically for upper body. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. So it's like actually paying attention to what you're choosing.
Do you think I can mold my chubby body into like Arnold Schwarzenegger's body with this?
No.
You think so?
No.
Damn it.
I think you can get to a part where your body is toned, because this is using resistance training, which isn't really like, you're not lifting weights with this. You're basically working out with the own force of your body. So it's a lot of like the same concept of bands working out, where you're just pulling against your own strength. So you're not really going to get like jacked, but you'll get to a part where your body is very toned.
So I guess that was a bad example. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a bodybuilder. Let's go with like Ryan Gosling, because he's just thin. He's kind of toned, you know? He's a sexy boy. How about that?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe you get it and you try, and you let me know how that works.
I actually really like games that gamify exercise. I think they're so cool. I've been really wanting to try them out more. That's one of the main reasons I want to get a VR headset, like a PlayStation VR, so I could play
that
Beat
Beat
Saber.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were like, of course, the older Wii games that like Wii Fit and stuff like that tried to gamify exercise that I feel like didn't do it exceptionally well.
Right.
But this sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be into this.
I mean, I think it's a great purchase. It's $80, which is a little high, you know, because normal games are like 50, 60. But like, if you're thinking about it, you're essentially paying for the game, which is a full-fledged game. It has a full RPG adventure mode in it, so that's $60. And you're only paying $20 for the Pilates ring and that band. But the Pilates ring is actually pretty well done, at least I've played it for like 3 days so far. My wife has used it as well, the same amount that I have, and it's just fine. I thought that it was going to be weird because I'm really pushing against it, but it seems pretty sturdy.
I would recommend just most people, if they're having a hard time justifying getting an $80 video game that's like this, just tell your significant other or whoever's doubting you that it's cheaper than paying for a new ass, you know? Be like, yeah, I'm going to mold it. I'm going to sculpt myself into an Adonis.
I thought you were going to go in such a different direction.
What?
I thought you were going to, because for some reason, I guess I was thinking of my own situation. Me and my wife got it because we were both like, oh, we can both benefit from it, so we're both going to split the cost 40-40. And I thought you were going to go that way of being like, oh, if you're splitting it with someone and they're playing, you know, you'll both get to utilize essentially what would be like instead paying for 2 gym memberships. And then you went with the I'm a sexy Adonis.
I was going for ass implants. That's where I was going.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's also an alternative, but
this is cheaper. So
very true. Very true.
Speaking of cheaper, which not really, the games that I have been playing this week are not cheaper at all, probably.
Not if you're paying for physical, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. The games I've been playing this week, I haven't played basically any indie games. I want to get back to Children of Morta, but I played a lot of Destiny 2 over the weekend. I don't know if you saw me tweet it out, but I did finally get the Platinum Trophy in Destiny 2 because I finally got, so I needed 2 trophies. I needed Ikora's Protege, which has been the bane of my fucking existence for a long time, because it's like a gold trophy that all you have to do is max out the Warlock subclasses. And that sounds easy enough. It's like, okay, whatever. But back in Forsaken, they gave you a 3rd Warlock subclass that you could only unlock by getting a certain material that, they technically gave you like a 9th. Because you already had 3, and then you got... I mean, it's kind of like you have 6, but they have multiple paths as well. It's kind of weird. But you essentially just had to max out all of these subclasses on the Warlock, because I had already done it on the Titan and the Hunter. So by the time that I got this 3rd tree, I was like, son of a bitch. And I couldn't do it because I didn't have anybody to grind this specific place with me. So when Shadowkeep came out, and they're like, hey... they're literally just unlocked. They're unlocked and you don't even have to worry about it. I was like, what the hell? I technically have unlocked this. Why is this trophy not popping? It was pissing me off until my old roommate, my best friend, he sent me a picture, like the little bitch he is, of his platinum trophy, and that he just got the Icora's protege. Like he had just gotten that trophy, and I was like, how'd you do it? And he's like, oh, I just deleted my warlock and then made a new one. And it immediately just gave it to him. So it's like, son of a bitch. And then I did the Leviathan raid over the weekend with a couple of friends of mine. It was excessive. There was a lot. There's just too much. It was 4.5 hours.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah, 4.5 hours, and we had already played a decent amount beforehand because we were grinding out to get a certain gun in competitive player versus player, and it was just a lot. Like, I had to dump out. Freaking a guy had to make bread. One of the guys disconnected twice. We had to, like, get a new player because one guy was playing the raid with us, but he was like, hey, guys, I have to go to bed because I have to be to work in 4 hours. At this point in time, we had only been in this raid for like an hour.
Oh, my God.
So, like, what the fuck? He was from, like, I don't know. He was from, like, I think Britain or Australia, but it was real weird. I was like, dude, what do you do? Actually, I think he was from Britain because he said he was eating jammy Dodgers. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's a biscuit. And I was like, once again, what is that? And he had to go to the whole thing about biscuits being cookies. So that is mostly what I played over the weekend. I've been watching a whole lot of anime. I watched Looking for Alaska, which is the reason why I don't know if I brought this up outside of the podcast or on the podcast, but it is the reason why I was telling you that like John Green, one of the like 2 vlog brothers on YouTube, he also writes novels like Paper Towns and The Fault in Our Stars. Mm-hmm. He writes those. He wrote Looking for Alaska, and then Hulu made it into like a miniseries. So that was 8 hours of my life that I used because they're each an hour long and it's 8 episodes. But
is it good though?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it.
Okay.
It was
pretty
great.
It.
Yeah, it made me cry like 4 times, which is kind of hilarious because then I told my fiance about it and she was like, "What? You didn't tell me?" She was like all pissed that she didn't get to see me bawl. Wow. And I was like, "Really?" So while I was
she
watching,
really does hate you. She's making fun of you for your ice cream choice. She's getting enjoyment out of just watching you cry.
She actually really enjoys it when I cry. Yeah, she's a big fan. Because I'm just like this stoic, muscly badass most of the time. And then she sees me cry and she's like, implants. He is human. Yeah, I don't actually have biceps. They're just like gelatin.
That's gross.
So yeah, I watched that and she was basically like prowling. She was looking at me through the crack in the door hoping to see me cry during this pivotal scene in the show. And I was like, get the fuck out of here.
That's really strange. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it is.
You have an interesting relationship.
Speaking of interesting relationships, because I've got nothing more to talk about. I didn't do a whole lot other than play Destiny. It's time to get into the news.
Transition.
So good. Our first news story is over on GameSpot. It is written by Eddie McCook. I don't know. It's Makuch. What would you say that last name is?
McCutch?
All right, let's go with McCutch, even though that kind of sounds dirty. This is Devolver Boss defends Steam amid Epic Games Store and exclusivity controversy. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not at all what he fucking said, but all right, let's get into this. One of the most talked about developments in gaming over the past year has been Fortnite developer Epic establishing a new digital store and its pursuit of exclusives, of which there have been many. In addition to paying for exclusive, Epic gives creators 88% of the revenue compared to 70% on Steam and others. Yeah, and okay, I don't know why that got me. Publisher Ubisoft no longer releases new titles on Steam because they believe the 70-30 revenue split is unreasonable. Now one of the founders of boutique game publisher Devolver Digital, known for Hotline Miami.
Welcome to Miami.
Genital jousting and Fall Guys has spoken.
You
up
ever play
to
genital
defend...
jousting?
No, I read that and I was like,
hilarious.
what the fuck
It
is
is
that?
hilarious.
I'm assuming it. Okay, what is it about?
It's you're exactly what you think you are. You're genitals and you are jousting.
Awesome. Has spoken up to defend Steam and call for a reset of the wider conversation that can at times paint Steam as the bad guy. Once again, I don't see how you got that, but okay, unless it's just left out of this. All right, though. I feel like this conversation needs to be reset. That is obvious. Graham Struthers, I'm going to say is what his name is. Graham Struthers told GameSpot at PAX Australia, the conversation never really took place properly, in my opinion. Struthers said, the launch of Steam more than a decade ago changed the landscape of PC gaming. Steam was an integral part of the success of Devolver and other studios. One part of what made Steam appealing then and continues to now is that developers are paid every month, which is not the case with every store. So I didn't actually know that. It makes me wonder how, like, what the Epic Game Store, like, how often they pay you, if it's every month or if it's after every sale.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really too sure. I think it's also hard to tell because a lot of what Epic Game Store is doing right now is giving like money up front.
Yeah, for their exclusives.
So that probably doesn't matter as much. But yeah, I mean, I assume they would have to give that money up front and then be like, all right, now we'll give you money whenever you sell something. Like, I think it would be easier to get away with that kind of model as opposed to, well, I don't know. I
believe with the exclusives, what they do is they give the developer money up front, and then I think they basically, I would assume they take the money up into the amount that they paid, and then after that, the rest is just kind of gravy. Yeah, but
I mean, that would make sense.
I'm not 100% sure. I just kind of want to know how often they, like, when it's not an exclusive and it's just a game that is released on their platform, how often did they release people's money, kind of a thing. Like, is it every month? Is it after every purchase? Is it every week? That kind of a thing. I kind of wish this article just had some sort of context given to that, like kind of just a list maybe of other stores that don't actually give it per month, but also this is more of an interview, so yeah, I guess it makes sense. Because if Struthers didn't bring it up, then it makes sense that they wouldn't include it.
Right.
He goes on to say, every month we were getting paid, and you were being paid accurately. He said, we've all got our horror stories about doing audits of our publishers and finding huge discrepancies about what was being reported in sales. Here's Steam's every month accurate, straightforward, and transparent. Okay, that part's fucked up. That they have to audit their publishers and they're like, yeah, you owe us money, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know why that had never crossed my mind that kind of stuff would happen. But
yeah, well, if there's a way to steal money, people will figure it out.
Yeah, maybe if Nicholas publishes your game.
You see?
Fuck you. Regarding the revenue shares, Struthers point out that Steam's 30% cut was a more generous offer than others at the time. Mm-hmm. The payment scheme that Steam offered allowed publishers to offer more favorable terms to developers, Struthers said, to come out of a model before Steam where we were as, I don't know why I'm having so many issues like reading his stuff, as a games publisher, maybe making 25%, and that's if you were successful. To be in a 70-30 relationship it was transformative in every sense, he said, and that led to realignment with relationships with developers. If there is more money and it's more frequent, you can have better terms with developers. With the launch of competing game stores, including Epic's, developers Okay, yeah. I'm having so many issues. Developers have more options, and this competition is good overall for the industry, Struthers said. At the same time, Struthers stressed that comparing Steam to Epic directly is not fair or helpful. Steam has been around for more than a decade. It's a refined platform with an important toolset and features for developers and consumers alike that make for a better overall experience. Competition is going to come along at some point. Epic has taken a view that their way of bringing content to their platform is far more generous revenue share, and obviously they've been pushing exclusives. That's great, he explained, and it's giving developers and publishers a choice. You can't compare the two things, however, as like for like. Steam has invested I don't know how many millions of dollars in their platform. Epic have yet to do that. I'm not saying they won't, and hopefully they will, in terms of the features and in terms of tool sets for developers. There's a ways to go, but competition is good. Finally, Struthers said all the drama and controversy over Epic paying for exclusives doesn't really hold up because exclusivity has been a part of gaming since the beginning. The rise about developers and publishers going to Epic and exclusivity, it doesn't really hold up, he said. I played games on PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch, and Devolver. We've done console exclusives with Sony, with Microsoft. I think it's good, but I think we have to respect Steam for what they've done. Without them, none of this would have been a conversation in the first place. I don't know why I was like mid burp. It just kind of got weird. It was uncomfortable.
Let's get weird.
So he's not really saying anything that no one has said before. And it's kind of weird. This is once again kind of like, it feels like a non-story. Like we already knew about the larger revenue shares. We already knew the argument like pro Steam and pro Epic, that Epic gives larger revenue shares, but Steam has more features. We've known about basically all of this from the beginning, and the argument that exclusives have basically existed since the beginning of gaming has existed the whole time as well. So this isn't necessarily like, I don't know, this isn't a new opinion in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of back and forth on this subject as we've gone over weeks on weeks. I think it's interesting because he does bring up a good point of like, you know, for the people who see Epic and just go, oh, well, they're better for developers, so they're the winner. How could you, Steam? Like, blah, blah, blah. You charge way too much. It's like, well, in the past, that was actually a good model, and that was better than others. So it's not like Steam is evil, per se. So, like, I get the point that he's trying to, like, push in this, and that obviously competition is a good thing. But, yeah, it's just more of, like, okay, well, when does it become a time to compare them then?
Yeah, I see. I do actually kind of understand that a little bit more now that you point that out. But there's also like the Epic isn't necessarily like, I mean, at least the CEO of Epic, as far as I know, has said that they don't necessarily see Steam as a bad guy. They're just doing the exclusivity stuff until they change their revenue shares. So at a point in time, it was a pretty awesome revenue share, going from possibly like seemingly at their highest 25% to going to 70%. But now, since it's very possible that Steam doesn't do as much for developers, they're still taking such a large revenue share. But there's also all the things that Steam has done over the years to kind of make the landscape of PC what it is. Can't be discredited. But also, I mean, you could just, I don't know. The revenue share thing will always bother me because at some point in time, just enough has to be enough. They have a lot of money. They have probably more money than most. And they don't necessarily need to take 30% anymore because they don't do a whole lot. If anything, the fact that their platform is like they don't really gatekeep. You can put basically anything you want on Steam. Isn't exactly a good thing. Like, it is at some points in time because indie developers get to put their game on a store, and it's not as bad as PlayStation or stuff like that, but their store is just overcrowded. There's like thousands upon thousands of games on their store, which, I mean, I feel like the Epic Game Store might be fairly similar. But I don't know. It just seems like the stuff that Steam has been offering developers has not exactly evolved.
Right.
When like what developers need from Steam has.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough, and I think it also like. So one of the things he mentioned is they're not putting money into their own store, which obviously they are, but it just takes time. And that's kind of why I go to my point of like, when is it going to be the right time to really judge these two then effectively? Just because Epic is at a point where it needs to do all these exclusives, because otherwise, you know, there would be a clear winner. It's like, why would you go to Steam if they didn't have that game that is only available there? But that's going to take time, and I don't know if Epic is pushing as much as they need to get there quicker. But it seems like they have money to burn, so they'll just keep doing exclusives until then.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I'm interested to see how the Epic Game Store evolves once they start to really add those features in that people are really hankering for. Which is kind of interesting. Like it seems like the Epic Game Store is possibly better for developers, but worse for gamers in a way, just because they don't have those features. Yeah. It's such an interesting argument between the two, and I have been known to make the argument that exclusives have existed since the beginning of gaming, just like he has. But you also have to take into account that they haven't necessarily existed on PC for all that long.
Right. That's why it's such a big deal, is because PC gamers are getting very upset with the fact that now we're in a time where all of a sudden it's becoming an issue of like, where do I play it? When that used to be the big joke, is from a PC gamer perspective, we didn't really care when the console wars were going crazy because, you know, it was like, oh, we want to play this here, we want to play this here, blah, blah, blah. It should be on our console. And most games are always on PC anyway, so it was like, well, whatever.
The weirdest thing about it is that you have to give credit to Steam for making the marketplace what it is today, exclusives and all. Like, Steam, for the most part, is the reason that PC exclusives exist, seemingly. Like, Ubisoft going off and just creating their own launcher and exclusively selling through there. At least I think they exclusively sell through there. I'm fairly certain they do. But that is seemingly in, like, it is that way because Steam would not change their revenue shares. So, Steam inadvertently created their own worst enemy.
Yeah, I mean, that's how competition works.
Yeah, that's very true. Speaking of Devolver, because not really speaking of competition, our next article continues with Devolver, the same guy actually, and also written by the same guy over on GameSpot, Eddie McCook, maybe. This is Devolver founder excited by PS5 and next-gen Xbox. It's good for everyone. One of the founders of Devolver Digital, the boutique publisher behind games like Hotline Miami and General Jousting, you got to enjoy that he used both those games.
Yeah, he really likes General Jousting. Huh?
Yeah, seemingly. Is eager to see Sony and Microsoft launch their next generation platforms. Speaking to GameSpot at PAX Australia, dude, he must have, like, these guys must have spoke to him for a long time.
Yeah, they've just been talking about the same couple of things, just trying to get all them articles out.
Graham Struthers said he's excited about the launch of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Project Scarlet in 2020, in part because those systems are expected to be attractive to all developers, big and small. This wasn't always the case, as Struthers, who has been with the company since he co-founded it in 2009, pointed out that PS3 and 360 generation wasn't the most inviting for indie developers. It's great, Struthers said, of the upcoming release of PS5 and the next Xbox. The previous generation, the one we're coming to the end of, was the one for companies like ourselves. We were allowed in. Previously, it was pretty hard to be on PS3 and 360 for next gen. We're in at the start, given the same opportunities as everybody else, which is great. So right there, I kind of wanted to just bring up something. I don't know necessarily, because I am not part of Devolver Digital and I'm not a game developer, at least not yet, because, my ultimate goal is to make games. But
one day.
I don't know necessarily what opportunities might have been given to AAA developers over indie developers, but I would say that the 360 and PS3 generations are more of what kicked off indies than PS4 and Xbox One, because they actually opened the doors. PS4 and Xbox One had them since the beginning, roughly, but PS3 was super behind for a long time, and then actually focused on indies as a main selling point for the system. It's constantly brought up that PlayStation specifically use them as a selling point with the whole PlayStation loves indies thing, and that's why it was such a big deal that, and I think this is actually kind of funny, that PlayStation, or a representative at PlayStation, came out and said that with the PS5 they're going to be focusing mostly on AAA games. So it's kind of interesting that Graham Struthers is like, oh yeah, I'm really excited for PS5, when it seems like PS5 might actually be a backstep for indie developers instead of kind of including them in this great way. But also, I'm not an indie developer, so I don't really know. And I'm also not 100% sure about the Xbox Project Scarlet. It's very possible that will be a main selling point for them. But yeah, it's kind of weird. You can't really discount how much PS3's PlayStation Love Indies and Xbox Live Arcade did for indie games, and to really thrust them into just the grand scheme of things to get them into everybody's face. So I think it's kind of weird that he is kind of talking down to them, but saying that PS4 and Xbox One were better.
I mean, maybe he's talking about early on in that life cycle, because when they were just starting, it might have still been hard from a developer standpoint of getting your game to that console or that marketplace. Whereas, from a consumer, it's easy because we just have to log in and download whatever game it is. But maybe it was the actual infrastructure to get your game approved, to get your game working on that console was difficult. And then as the later years went by, even though it wasn't as marketable, the PS4 and the Xbox One X, maybe it was just easier to get them to that platform, is what he means. Because it just might be a difference, a disconnect between the developer side of things versus the consumer side.
That is possible. I have personally heard on a plethora of podcasts, it is actually harder to get on PlayStation now than it used to be.
I don't know.
But I mean, something I'm not considering is actually what Xbox Game Pass has actually done for indie developers. The fact that seemingly people are selling a bunch of their indies, or they're kind of getting a lot of attention to them because they're on Game Pass. But I still don't understand how that exactly works. Is Microsoft
how they get
just
revenue from that?
Yeah, I don't understand it. I don't think I ever will, because it's literally just hey, it's $5, whatever, and you get all these games. You get to play these indie games that just came out, like Ashen and freaking Ori and the Blind Forest, all sorts of stuff that it's just crazy. Obviously, Ori and the Blind Forest came out way before Game Pass did, but that was just something I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, it's a good point though, because there's a lot of games that are day of release that are coming to Game Pass, which is pretty nuts when you think about it. And granted, there's obviously their exclusives, which make more sense because they're trying to push their product, but they're still getting indies that are relatively new that they're pushing. And I assume the only way they would do that is something similar to like a Epic Game Store model of paying them a big chunk upfront and saying, hey, we're going to give you this money to have, as many people as we want basically play this during their time with the subscription.
Yeah, I would assume that's what they do, because from what I understand, that's actually what PlayStation does with their PlayStation Plus titles, how they give them to you for free. They basically just buy them in bulk and give it to everybody. So the article goes on to say, while Struthers is indeed excited about the potential of the PS5 and the next Xbox to grow the gaming category overall, the executive observation that the new consoles... The executive observed that the new consoles seem to be more iterative in nature instead of dramatically different or improved versions of their predecessors. I think it is ever harder to tell the differences between new consoles, but it's also cool that they're both coming in with a new generation of consoles. Because it means they're going to invest more money in the space, which will create more users, he said. It's good for everyone and to have Nintendo in such good, vibrant health as well. We've got 3 console platforms, Apple Arcade to mull over, and Steam and Epic. And then it kind of just goes on to say a bunch of stuff.
This Struthers guy is such a glass half full character. Both these articles have been very positive and optimistic about everything.
Yeah, that's very true. He's super upbeat about everything, which I don't know. Maybe that's why I find his upbeatness weird, or the fact that he kind of downputs PS3 and Xbox 360 when he talks up all these other things. Maybe that's why I find it so weird.
I don't know, man. I mean, I'm kind of right there with you. I feel like PS5 and Xbox One X are not going to be the biggest hitters when it comes to indie titles. I feel like the Switch kind of has that hold for now, and it would be a weird twist. There would have to be something very unique or something very appealing to grab that audience to take them away from Switch, because the reason why the Switch is so great for indies is because a lot of indie titles don't have the same type of graphical intensity that is needed on those bigger consoles, and the Switch is such a cheaper selling point, especially when now you can get a console for only $200 with the Switch Lite.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that I can't actually say this is a fact. One, I feel like overcrowding isn't a big deal on the Nintendo Switch because they actually have a decent enough marketplace. I would say I don't think it's as hard to navigate as PlayStation's, if I'm being honest.
I don't know. I think all of them are crap.
Oh, they're absolutely terrible. They're all very bad. But I would say that I think that Nintendo's is actually the lesser of 3 evils. Because
give it a year and we'll see about that.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely gonna get overcrowded. I mean, especially with all these indies coming to the Nintendo Switch, the fact that every single week we have in new stuff 5 different indie games that are coming to the Nintendo Switch, it's definitely going to get overcrowded. I just hope it doesn't get to the point that PlayStation is, where if I wanted to find Destiny 2 Shadowkeep without buying the digital deluxe or any other things, I had to spend 10 minutes looking for it. And even then, I couldn't look it up by itself. I actually had to go to Destiny 2, go to expansions, then click on Shadowkeep, then I could purchase it by itself, instead of being able to just type in Destiny 2 Shadowkeep and purchase it. Instead, I got a bunch of other shit. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you would think that they'd be more excited about the, more excited about the Switch and less excited about new consoles, because let's be honest, in the beginning of this next console race, nobody's really going to be talking about indies, or what I mean is nobody's going to be PlayStation and Microsoft, Sony and Microsoft, PlayStation and Xbox are not going to necessarily be touting indie games.
It's all going to be about the exclusives they're holding up from their, first party, second party.
Yeah, they're not going to be they're going to be talking about larger AAA tentpole system sellers. They're not going to be talking about, they'll talk about obviously the next they're going to talk about Ori and the Will of the Wisp, but that's a special case. Overall, they probably won't be talking about many indies to sell their systems.
You know what? This is a pretty good transition topic.
That is a very good transition topic. Speaking of indie games, I don't know. I totally fucked it up.
Man, you had all this, like, built it up. It was all ready for you, and you looked at it, you took it, picked it up in your hands, and you just threw it right out the window. And you're like, what is this? Meh.
Our next article and last article is over on Nintendo Life. It is written by Damian McFerrin, I think. I'm going to go with that. He writes, fighting over what's indie and AAA harms the industry, says Sonic Mania and Cadence of Hyrule artist. I kind of see where the transition is going now.
There you go.
Yeah, I get you now. Once upon a time, the term indie meant you were making games on your own with little outside help or support, and the results were often basic and crude when compared to AAA titles. These days, the distinction between has become harder to make, as games that are considered to be indie titles are often as polished and playable as those which have come through the publisher system. And we're also a point. I'm assuming he meant at a point.
Yeah, we're also at a point where...
Yeah, we're also at a point where characters from games like Undertale and Shovel Knight are appearing in big budget releases like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Given the shifting nature of the industry, do we need to categorize games as indie or AAA anymore? Artist Paul Veer, which you gotta wonder how close, like how often people wonder if his name is Paul Revere. I don't know. That's just me. That's probably just me, actually.
Legally changed it because of people like you.
Maybe. Who worked on Cadence of Hyrule and Sonic Mania, thinks that the debate is pointless and doesn't do the games industry any favors. Speaking to Nintendo Force magazine, Veer said, I think it definitely is harder to describe these days, but I also don't think it's really important to make that distinction, at least not for me personally. In the end, we all just make games and recognize that rather than trying to split up the industry and fight over who is or isn't AAA or indie is a very good thing if you ask me. He adds that the aforementioned crossovers are proof that the divide between indie and publisher-led titles has never been less relevant. It feels like it's making collaborations between individuals and indie developers and indie developers and larger studios possible and more common. And I don't mean just stuff like Shovel Knight or Undertale being represented in Super Smash Bros. You're seeing a bunch of smaller studios taking on larger franchises nowadays with games like Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap. Shout out to Wonder Boy. Good game. Cadence of Hyrule, Streets of Rage 4, and River City Girls all happening in the past few years. Or even something like Toby Fox doing the soundtrack for Games Freak Little Town Hero. I generally hope we get to see a lot more collaboration like that, and I don't think we would have seen these kinds of things if we kept separating AAA and indie. Yeah, I've been talking about this for a while. I don't like the distinction between AAA and indie. I think, just like he does, it kind of just divides the industry unnecessarily. There's no reason to set them apart, especially because it seems like initially the divide was created. The two different words were created to kind of make sure that you weren't comparing indie games to AAAs anymore. But now that indie games are so good, there's not really a reason to do that. It's just, if we were to just call them games, then good games would be good, bad games would be bad, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't come down to how much money you put into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's 100% true, because there's a ton of AAA games that come out and they're just flops. But there's also a ton of indie games, and granted, there's indie games that come out of slops as well, but there's a ton of indie games that are amazing. You know, things like Celeste, that in itself could have won Game of the Year last year. Like, there's a lot of really special games that are coming out, and we've talked about this before. The term indie is so switched around and used when it's convenient, but in other times isn't. Like, it doesn't really mean much. It's just one team has a lot of money and the other team doesn't have as much.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if I've said this before, but it kind of sounds like, I don't know, the it being necessary to keep indie there is kind of like people looking down on like indie developers' games, saying that they're trying to like in a way protect them from having to go up against AAA games, which I don't think is necessary anymore. I think AAA games definitely do have at times have a higher quality, like a higher caliber graphical fidelity, but even that's getting pushed with games like Senua's Sacrifice, which was made by an incredibly small indie team, and that game looks fantastic. So I don't think it's necessary anymore. And if anything, it's just kind of annoying. And it's I'm always going to hate the fact that like there's a separation between Game of the Year and Indie Game of the Year, because it just seems like kind of a participation trophy. Like, you were there. You're not that good, but you're there.
You're the best of, the others.
Yeah, you're the best of the rejects.
Yeah, pretty much. It makes me laugh every time we get on this conversation, because we always devolve into this conversation where at the end of the day we're both like, indie is dumb, and it's like, what is your podcast about again?
Yeah, right. Not having the distinction between indie games and AAA is kind of what keeps this podcast going. I don't know. I think indie should.
I mean, I use it as more of indie games are generally not as well publicized.
Yeah, that's kind of where I go with it too. I think the biggest distinction between the two is definitely, like you said, the amount of people that may or may not talk about them. That's kind of why this podcast is always probably going to exist, or at least hopefully, cross my fingers, going to exist, because there's always going to be like these lesser known games created by smaller development teams that aren't going to be talked about as much because they just don't have a marketing budget. And yeah, that's kind of what indie game is coming down to. Like you said, is literally just marketing budget at this point. It is no longer quality, which I'm going to say again, annoys me so much, that the fact that it's so closely correlated with quality that people still think indie represents quality, that if a game is over $20, then it's a big issue, which I'm going to say once again as well, I'm part of the problem, because I look at them and I'm like, ooh, more than $20? I don't know if I'm going to buy that one. But
you're the issue.
Yeah, I'm a proponent. I'm not doing much to keep it from happening. I'm just kind of talking out my ass. But speaking of talking out my ass, I think it's about time we hop into News Cram.
Cram!
Nice. That was a good one.
Thank you.
I like it a lot. News Cram is our weekly wrap-up segment where we, the host of Indie Incursion and Indie Games podcast, since I didn't want to clip it all together, cram you full of all sorts of indie games news. This week in News Cram, we have just one news story before we hop into a bunch of news stuff for you. So, our first news story, and it's actually kind of a quick one this week, comes from Nintendo Life. Those eager beavers who've already purchased A Hat in Time on the Nintendo Switch might notice a storage issue sooner rather than later. That's because reportedly the file size is a colossal 16 gigabytes on the Nintendo Switch, which is roughly 4 times larger than the PlayStation 4 port and twice as large as PC. How do you feel about that, Big Josh Boy? Any reason why you'd think that? I mean, you made a joke earlier there was more hats, but...
Just a lot of hats. All the hats. There's too many hats, not enough time.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering why. Like, seriously, why?
Unoptimized? I don't know. I guess it was a bad port. I don't know. Maybe it's a good port. Who knows, man? Sometimes things are bigger than they appear. I don't know nothing about dev talk, so that's all I got for you.
All right, let's hop into some news stuff. Our first 5 items in news stuff come from Nintendo Life. Developer Lab Zero, known for indie hits such as Skullgirl, the Skullgirls franchise, and the recent indie darling Indivisible, comes Skullgirls' second encore, available right now on the Nintendo Switch. From indie developer duo Ang. It's Ange. So maybe it's Angie, but
Could be both.
I'm not 100% sure. And Arlene Potier? I don't know how to say these names. Just listen for the game title. It comes somber platformer Yuri. Look up Yuri. Okay, Yuri. Look up that game. Which is headed to the Nintendo Switch on October 31st. Point-and-click horror game. Just Ignore Them by developer Stranga, which is Stranga Games.
Man, they're giving you a lot of weird ones today.
Yep. Is available right now on the Nintendo Switch for $4.99. Indie action platformer Battle Princess Madeline pays homage to Ghosts and Goblins on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 with a limited physical release through Limited Run Games. That one might be hard to pick up. I'm not 100% sure. I believe it's going on sale on Friday, maybe, or on Thursday. So by the time you're listening to this, if you want to get a physical copy of Battle Princess Madeline, make sure to hop over to Limited Run Games and pick yourself up one. Speaking of, dude, I bought that sweet-ass Wonder Song Collector's Edition on there. Yeah.
All right. Very nice. Did you actually even beat it yet?
No.
You big old goober.
See, that's my point, is when I get these collector's editions is when I'm going to beat them. My Celeste collector's edition supposedly is going to ship out next week. So, yeah, quick update on that. Limited Run. Finally going to ship this bitch out. I'm excited to actually play through the rest of Celeste. Probably just going to use the accessibility features because I'm kind of sick of the level that I'm on, but...
It's, yeah. I mean, I think you shouldn't, but...
I probably won't. I don't know why I did that so loud into the mic.
That's okay. It wasn't that loud. But maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Visual novel Will, A Wonderful World is getting a limited physical release on the Nintendo Switch for $79.99. And I believe there's only 400 copies of that one. So if you guys want to pick it up, I would recommend just kind of looking that up because the publisher is really weird. It's really odd.
Really weird.
Yeah, or just go to Nintendo Life, look for the article, and then they did not actually link it. So good luck with that. Now we're
Okay.
Now we're moving over to Twinfinite for our next news story. Developer Plausible Concepts has announced that Bad North Jotun Edition is now available on both iOS and Android for $4.99. And lastly, Polygon reports that developer William Kier, it's Chyr. So, not exactly sure.
Chair?
Let's go with Chair. William Chair has just announced that puzzle game Manifold Garden is available through the Epic Game Store and Apple Arcade, as well as heading to PlayStation 4 at a later date. All right. Cool. The biggest of average Josh boys, are you ready for our next segment?
I'm so ready.
All right. So we've been blessed with so many amazing indie games news stories that I think it's about time we give back to the developers in our next segment, God Bless the Crowd. This is where the biggest of average Josh boys hops into all sorts of different crowdfunding sites, and we talk about one of them. Today, we have literally one. Good job.
Thank you. One of them. That's what I do.
Normally we have two, but this one is actually kind of interesting. This one is actually over on fig.co. This is one of our just rare Fig entries, but we've actually talked about the reason that happens. So we don't need to do it again. This is Put 'em Up, an animal heist simulator. This one... On Fig, they're still doing the roadmap stuff where they're not technically asking for a specific goal. Instead, they're just trying to hit milestones. Yeah. So if this game sounds good for you, go over and kind of just like purchase the one that you want. I guess as far as I see, they don't actually have many different tiers. I think they just have the early bird backer, right? For the $15.
Yeah, so there's the super early bird, which has already been taken, which was $13. That's sold out. There's only 200 people, and they're already been claimed, and now it's the early bird backer. So the reasoning behind this, and we talked about this, the open access part of Fig, it's like this new model that they're going about where the game is pretty much in a state of you being able to play it, and you're paying the money not for tiers in the sense of like Kickstarters where, hey, I'm going to pay a bunch of money and I got a shirt. Instead, this is just saying, hey, you can pay a reasonable amount, this $15. You'll get the game, you'll get to play it, and based on how many people actually go into this with us as, the testers for this alpha access or beta access, depending on where the game is at, you'll then get milestones where they'll add certain things available. The one thing about this game, I'm not too crazy about their milestones. The first one is good because they're adding a new animal. So I guess to backtrack a bit, the actual game is all about just running in here being a weird physics-based animal. So a giant chicken, a giant alligator, a giant moose, it looks like, and just running through and trying to rob a bank for some reason.
Yeah, it's a lot like Gang Beasts.
Yeah,
It basically looks like a Gang Beast heist game.
Yeah, so this seems like a very, it's going to be frustrating, but in a very hilarious way of you just really messing around and just seeing kind of the wacky world that unfolds of you as a giant alligator trying to rob a bank where you're basically just flailing your arms around until you get to wherever you need to go. I think it's awesome. I really like the concept of this. I think this is definitely going to be an interesting game to get from an alpha perspective, because I'm sure it'll be even buggier than it will be, when it gets to be more of an actual full-fledged game. So that might add a bit of character to it, just in itself. But their milestones,
balls.
Yeah, I'm not as crazy about them. And the solace to that is obviously you're not really buying this for the milestone. You're buying it just because you're paying the $15 to get early access to it and to play it and give feedback and build the community for this game. But their milestones, the first one is a new animal, which is legit.
Which is probably going to be a goose, let's be real. They're going to capitalize on that Untitled Goose Game.
I mean, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with it. That'd be dope.
Yeah. But then the second milestone... Oh, actually, they changed this one. That's interesting. Okay, so the new milestone 2, is a new mini game of your choice, which seems weird because there's more than 200 people who have already bought it. So does everyone get a choice? Is going to be a Google survey kind of a thing? I don't know about that.
Yeah, and it seems like their mini games are mostly just sports based, because the only two that they featured were golf and bowling.
And the bowling, which I think looks ridiculous. But I mean, that's fine because they're just adding wacky elements to the game. Originally, when I first saw this, their thing was milestone 2 was literally adding a plushie.
Oh, what the...
But it wasn't to your order. It was just, we're going to then make plushies of the chicken or something.
And you can buy them?
Yeah, and then I guess you could buy them. It didn't specify that you were getting it. So I assume based on user feedback, they were oh, people don't want this.
Yeah, that sounds like dog shit.
Yeah, they want an actual milestone. That's one of the reasons why I was kind of meh about those milestones. This actually makes more sense that it's a new animal and then a new mini game of your choice. It's not obviously the best of things you can get, but as the game progresses, I'm sure they'll get more expansive, and depending on if a lot of people do back it and they actually get, good money to have those, you're going from 10,000 to 20,000 as the next milestone. So another $10,000, you would assume they would put in oh, we're going to put in extra heists. We're going to put in, extra wacky elements or things that you can pick up and interact with in the world. Or, I'm not going to be as creative with this because I don't really know what they have or haven't created yet. But still, you can use your imagination, and I'm sure the milestones will get more extensive and interesting. It just depends on how many people actually put their money into this as it's in this early access open phase.
Do we know how long this is going to be on Fig for? Does it just get the standard month?
No, I don't think so, because let me do a quick check.
I'm mostly just curious because the 20,000 is TBD. You don't actually know what it's going to be. So,
right.
I mean, it would just be weird if it was still TBD if it's near the time when they're, going to cut off.
Yeah. So my understanding for these open access betas, and I went to do a quick check on the one that was that we originally talked about when this first came out, that Vagris. I never know exactly how to say it. They're still in their open access beta. I believe what they're doing is they're literally going to be in that open access phase until it's a full polished game and they actually go and sell it to the market.
That's kind of making me curious then, because the Unexplored 2 was also one that we talked about that was in this open access stuff, so I'm wondering if they're the same way.
Yeah,
Seemingly, it looks open. Yeah. Ah, cool.
Yeah,
that's
so
actually pretty nice.
Yeah, so it's an interesting way to go about it because at any point up until the game comes out, you can, buy it seemingly in this more cheaper version of the game. Because you would assume that as it comes out to market, it would be, an extra 5, 10, 15, whatever amount it is. But this is more like the reason why I don't think their milestones from the Put 'em Up game is very promising as far as this access program goes is it leans too much on the more traditional side of Kickstarters and campaign, like crowdfunding parts, where Unexplored 2 did more of an interesting adding to the world where their milestones, let me see the roadmap again, but their milestones were having in-game like scavenger hunts and events that at that certain point, people who had put the money in to get to that point would then have access to different things in game where you could win, and that would get you, I think, collectibles inside the game from that standpoint. So it like built that community around you wanting to be an early access person and to actually want to play the game, which granted might be harder for, put them up just based on what it is, but there could still be ways that they could do that based on like, hey, we hit $10,000 and we'll do, a specialty heist where we add some really weird elements to it that change up the game and alter it, or something like that that's only available, or maybe they do like a holiday specific thing based on the time that it comes out, or something to make them like, I think the way they did it in Unexplored 2 was if you win the event in there, you then get to do some of those normal crowdfunding site high tier things that you would see of like naming a character or like designing one. So you would get to play in the game, have something, maybe it's like whoever as a team gets the highest score in this game during that, period of time when they hit that goal, you then get to come up with the next new character and you get to decide who the animal would be. Like something like that would be extremely cool because you would be a part of that and be able to build into that, oh, I was the one who came up with it. I was the one who won the event. I got to create this animal, and it pushes others to want to be a part of it and to spend their money earlier to get that opportunity.
Yeah, and this, it doesn't really seem like you're part of development, right? Is what I'm assuming you're kind of getting at.
Yeah. And granted, that's not like a bad thing, so to speak, but I think it's not utilizing this open access program to the best of its ability.
Yeah, because that is what was so cool about the Unexplored 2, because you could affect development in real ways. Like when the game actually came out, like you said, people could do the standard stuff like, oh, make whatever, but then also there was that like little subsection where if you were the first to finish certain events, you would actually be put in the game's lore. I think that was really, really cool, and that's something, I mean, I don't feel like Put 'em Up will really get, I don't think this is going to be really lore based, but it would be cool to have something like that where you can actually affect the story of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, there's got to be a reason they're robbing the bank. There could be a background.
They're robbing the bank at the behest of a weird scientist that lives in the sewers.
See? That's some good lore right there. They could just add to it. Say why the scientist got to be this way,
Yeah, I think this game is really interesting. I think when it comes out, there's no way that they can charge more than $19.99 for it, mostly because that's how much Gang Beasts is. So that's kind of my like justifying that. Plus, I don't really know. Yeah, I mostly just because of Gang Beasts that I don't think that they could probably charge more than $19.99.
I mean, I think it depends on how much they put into the game and how extensive some of these events are. Like right now, we're only seeing the bank. We're only seeing a subset of that part of the game. As they expand and as this open access, period keeps going, perhaps it looks completely different. There's, more variety to it, and maybe they have more of a reason to charge, a higher price point. But I think 20 seems about right on the mark as far as what it is now. But granted, those higher tiers might become a thing and they might have more money to play around with some creative liberties. You don't know what it would become. So we'll see.
Yeah, and let alone the fact that, like, right now, let alone later on when this game actually comes out, the attitude around Gang Beasts might be completely different because their most recent reviews on Steam are actually mixed. So it seems like that game's popularity might be waning anyway. So it's possible that Put 'em Up might be a, like, I don't know, something that people who, like, the fans of Gang Beasts that aren't currently satisfied with it might flock to.
Scratch that itch.
Yeah, so, I mean, this game looks really interesting. So I might have to check it out. It looks cool. I'm not a big multiplayer guy.
I know.
So that's my problem. I did see that you were super stoked about the, like, in a way, online local play through Steam, though.
Dude, that blows my mind. I can't wait to actually give that a try. I think it just came out recently in their beta phase. I need to look more into how to do that. But, like, the fact that there's so many times where I've complained about a game where I'm like, damn, I wish this was multiplayer. The fact that it's only local co-op is kind of like driving me to not buy that. Like, I think it was like River Bonds or something, a recent game.
Yeah, River Bond.
Yeah, like that game is a great example. If it's on Steam, I could just be like, all right, well, you know what? I can play it online co-op anyway. And like, what a crazy experience. I don't even know how that works. Like what they're doing to get that. I guess it's just, I don't even know. But I feel like there might be some latency issues with that depending on how they go about technically doing that. But regardless, I think it's awesome. And I can't wait to actually try it out and see what it's like. I also kind of want to try Children of Morta and do that multiplayer. You want to play with me?
I'm on PS4.
Yo, get the fuck out, all right? This podcast is done. I'm done.
This podcast is done. Thanks for the sweet transition. I will probably... If it's cool and there's not too much latency, I really want to get through Children of Morta, so I would totally probably pick it up on PC to play with you. Because I am the guy who... I mean, I didn't actually purchase it. I was given a code by the developer, so...
I know, you should have asked for PC. Like I did.
Well, the reason that I got it on PS4 was actually because I'm doing content on the like console releases of it, which came out months later.
You jerk.
But that's the end of this podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. No random questions of today because people really enjoy to like the tweet, but do not actually reply with questions.
I mean, we got our favorite ice cream flavor in. That's kind of like a random question.
That's very true. And we talked about how stoked you are for Steam's pseudo online multiplayer.
Yeah, I mean, you could turn that into a question. It's kind of like we did it.
Thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys like this, make sure you follow us on Twitter at IndiePod is where you can actually write in your questions. Follow I'm not going to say the real hijinks. I personally just need to get better at messing around on that Twitter account. I need to do a tweet a day or something. Like ActiveQuest is really on it with their Twitter.
That's because Josh is really good about that. I see his little I like how they always say
they say who
tag
did it.
Josh who did it, and it's always Josh. I feel like.
Yeah, I do really enjoy that. Maybe we just need to find a third that'll be on the podcast
our
and then just
guy.
do the social.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't really like social media in general. I don't look at it a lot or care. So when it comes to this kind of thing, I'm always like, man, I should probably tweet. And then I think about it and I'm like, I don't have anything interesting to say. I don't know. Fuck it. And I just don't do anything.
I'm like an addict of Twitter. I'm always on Twitter, even though
That's what's so funny
matter.
that you won't use the IndiePod Twitter account. Like, just literally stay off your personal one. And
Well, it's mostly because I'm just goofing on Josh for not liking hentai and stuff like that. So
that's okay. We'll make a name for ourselves, I guess. Actually, nah, you know what? I don't want that. Never mind.
If you guys would like to follow me outside the show, you can follow me at Hyde Legion, where I talk about hentai, and at Josh Penwell. So, well, actually, it's at Penwell Writes. So feel free to tweet at him and be like, "Hey, I heard you like hentai."
Yeah, Chris is not gonna like this.
And make sure you follow Josh at _George90. He tweets about all sorts of weird stuff.
It's mostly about indie games, but
yeah, mostly
weird
about
stuff, I guess.
And on occasion, ice cream, I guess, maybe.
Oh, I haven't yet, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll go right now and I'll post something about ice cream. Why not, right?
So this is just a bit of context for those. I mean, nobody's actually watching. My fiance just peeked her head like the Grudge through the door and is
She's
staring.
like, are you crying?
No, she's not. What I doubt she's wondering if I'm crying. She's mostly probably just waiting so we can go get food.
She's like, stop this stupid podcast so I can eat, damn it.
Yeah, on that note, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.
Give us 5 stars. Bye.
That's a good point. Yeah, review the podcast on podcast services. iTunes, we've got 2. Give us more. Just 5-star reviews.
Again. Actually, bye.